Greetings and welcome to Education in Focus, powered by Chalkboard News. I am Dan McCaleb, Vice President of News and Content at the Franklin News Foundation. The foundation publishes chalkboardnews.com, a news website dedicated to issues related to K-12 education. Joining me today is Brendan Clary, Chalkboard's K-12 editor. How are you, Brendan?
I'm doing well, Darren. How about yourself?
I am doing great, thank you. We are recording this on Tuesday, September 5th. Now that we're past the Labor Day holiday, Brendan, pretty much all students across the country are back in school or preparing to be back in school. And that means an issue that you and I talked about in the spring, unfortunately continues to be an issue now that school is back in session. And that's swatting calls. Brendan, for those listeners who didn't hear our conversation back in May, please give us a reminder, our listeners a reminder, about what swatting is and why it's an issue.
Yeah, so from what I can understand, swatting is a version of a hoax call. So there is sort of a differentiation there. And a hoax call is when you call an institution, it could be a school, could be a theater, and you say that there's a threat, a fake threat, and with the intent to disrupt or to terrorize or to, kind of inflict a sort of upheaval at that institution. And so that is a hoax call. A swatting call is when you call a law enforcement agency and you tell them that there is a threat happening at that institution. So essentially, in a hoax call, you call, a school and you say that there is a false threat and you make threats against the school. And a swatting call, you call the local police department and you say, look, there's an ongoing threat. You need to get there now. And it's false, but then the police show up and they're all, ready to try to find this threat, which does not exist. So, you have armored vehicles, as many police officers at the scene as possible to try to protect students. And that's the swatting incident. So that's called a swatting call. And so that's the what we're seeing, Dan, is in a number of states like Illinois, and this was a problem in the spring as well. In New York in the spring, there was a number of swatting calls, and that's back on the rise.
Since we first started talking about this at Education in Focus, Brendan, the FBI, which is very much involved in these swatting calls, they set up a database keeping track of the number of calls that have come into police agencies saying there's a threat at a school, and they've now tracked, according to your reporting, more than 200 such calls across the country?
Yeah, that's right, Dan. So 200 incidents have been shared by local law enforcement since the initiative began in May of this year. And it doesn't look like at this point, what the news reports out there, that there are more swatting calls. The frequency doesn't show signs of slowing down. On Wednesday last week in Carpentersville, Illinois, a high school shut down for hours after a caller made false threats against the school and also called local police. So in that case, there was a hoax threat and then also the swatting call.
I just want to point out, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but Dundee Crown High School in Carpentersville is about a 12-mile drive from my home, so it's pretty much in my backyard. I was following the local news event locally, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. Why do people do this? I know you don't have an answer for that, but
I think that is sort of a great question, and that's actually what I asked an FBI special agent in charge in April, basically before some of these events and before the online database from the FBI was put together. And he basically said there are two types of hoax callers. There's students who think this is funny or this is a joke, and then there are those who are sort of malicious actors, like adults who are targeting institutions, and some of those are not even on U.S. soil, it sounds like. So for the FBI, they say if you're a student and you're thinking about making a swatting call, basically, you just remember that you could spend some time in jail for this, and you could have a felony conviction if you're found guilty of this. So it's what sounds like a joke is a very serious offense, and if it crosses state lines, there's a lot of risk there involved if you're found out. And the FBI has said that they have ways to try to figure out who made that call and prosecute that. But there is sort of this burgeoning technology. We have AI that's enabled a lot of great advancements, in terms of parsing data, but there's also a concern that it's able to mimic human voices. And it sounds like that a Georgia middle school last week as well was targeted by a swatting call, and it originated from Europe, apparently. So according to a local news report, that is what police thought. I've also heard from some others that there are some of these overseas actors who are using sort of America's law enforcement infrastructure against itself or against schools to basically organize chaos and disrupt our normal way of life. And it's easier than ever with some of these AI-enabled technologies. So there is one report earlier this year of using artificial intelligence to make these calls as it's called swatting as a service, where you pay $45 to this guy online in the dark web, and he would be able to target, a school in your area. So it's there's this very insidious sort of technology use that is kind of burgeoning, and I think it's sort of changing. And it's interesting to see how the FBI has been responding, and they've created this task force. And I know that there's been some U.S. lawmakers who've been at the forefront of this issue and sort of pushing the FBI to do that for a while. So it's interesting to see the law enforcement reaction, but their hands are sort of tied. And that was some of my in the reporting that I've done previously on this, is that you can't really not go and respond to a call. Right. If somebody says, hey, there's an ongoing threat at a school, you have to be there because you never know. So
and because of the rash of school shootings.
Absolutely.
Over the years, you can't do that. But the concern I guess I have is, can it create, and hopefully it doesn't, because you have to respond to these calls no matter how many turn out to be hoaxes or swats. Does it create a sort of boy who cried wolf effect? I don't know if you're familiar with it. You're a young one, Brendan. It's an old parable about a shepherd who made hoax calls about a wolf's after my sheep or whatever, and the community or the village responded, and after so many hoaxes, the village said, oh, he's just playing another hoax, and they doesn't respond. It can be concerning.
Yeah, from what I understand is that the law enforcement will continue to respond to these kinds of calls, and I think that they might need to figure out how do you weed out the real from the fake, and that do you need to have an AI detection sort of thing in the 911 responder. I'm trying to think about the receiver. How do you figure that out? And I'm not sure what that technology looks like, but I think at this point they're going to keep going. But it was interesting, if you are a victim of swatting, whether that's on your home or you work at a school or your students are at a school, the FBI told me that it's important to remain calm. So the special agent in charge of the St. Louis field office, he told me in April that if police are coming into your school and they're looking for a swatting incident, or if they show up at your house and somebody was swatting you or targeting you, with that, just to comply and let them do their jobs, because they're showing up and they think it's an active crime scene and that there's active threats, and so to comply with them and to be as calm as possible as you can in a situation like that, which is it's very hard to be calm. And so I think that that's something that they would want everybody to know this school year, that if this happens to you, to try to let the law enforcement officers do their job as fast as they can.
Well, this is a worrisome growing trend, but that is good advice, Brendan. I think it's important. I think we both feel it's important that parents are aware of this sad but growing trend, and teachers and educators and people who live near schools and all that kind of thing. But that's all the time we have this week. Listeners can keep up with this ongoing story and all stories related to K through 12 education at chalkboardnews.com. For Brendan Clary, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.